Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. Looks a little bit different today because, unfortunately, we ran into a glitch up in northern Michigan. Mark Warner and KVGI Media and all had a storm last night, and they are without power up there. So our production studio is in the dark. So we had to go to plan two, which is go back to good old trusty Zoom and record the show. So that's what I'm doing. And as always, the show is brought to you by DFW's networking diva, Christine Dean. She is a guru of helping people manage their websites, marketing. She's got all of the answers. You've heard me talk about her many, many times. Go to dfwnetworkingdiva.com and schedule a consultation with her. It's free, doesn't cost a cent. Contact her and say, I want you to take a look at my website. I want to share a couple of marketing ideas with you. What do you think? And she'll be perfectly honest with you. She's an absolute dear to work with. And also, we're brought to you by Irving Chung, who is a franchise consultant. And if you have ever given even the slightest thought to maybe opening up a franchise, either full-time, or Irving can tell you about a lot of franchises that you can get involved in part-time. Don't have to leave your current job. You can do it on the side and make lots of money and all. In fact, if you'll tune in to my other show, Something to Talk About, Irving's going to be my co-host today later. So check that one out too. But right now, it's Someone You Should Know. And a very, very, very sweet young lady is joining us today. Mirenda Canady is with us this morning. Mirenda, good morning. I think you're there.
Yes,
there
I'm
you
here.
are. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey there, Stuart.
We're going to have a good time this morning because we're going to share a lot of information. And the real mainstream idea of getting Mirenda into the show was she has written a book about the 7 reasons to stay married. And I was very fascinated by it. But there's also, flip the page, and she has started what's called the Abigail Movement. And they're kind of related and in some ways. And I just found it fascinating when I first met you. And I said, I got to get her on the show to explain a little bit about what the Abigail Movement is, how it got started, 7 ways to keep your marriage going. It's been a passion of yours for quite a while. And right from the get-go, I guess what grabbed me was the fact that we both know that almost 50% of all marriages end in divorce. Whether it's the first marriage or even second marriages are doomed for failure. And third marriages too. Yeah. But people have a tendency to say, well, listen, if a lot of other people get married once or twice or 3 times and all, so if it doesn't work out, just walk away. That isn't really necessarily the reason to walk away, because that spark might be there. You just got to learn how to reignite it. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a mindset change. It's a way of looking and thinking about marriage that I'm encouraging folks to do. I think that because it's a husband and a wife, and they're like, all the focus is on them, and society says the marriage is about the husband and the wife and 2 becoming 1. But in actuality, when these 2 people get married, they have offspring, right? And so there's a commitment to the offspring. And not only that, but these 2 people come with family. And then there's a connection that happens there. And even with friends, connect through. I know I did. A lot of my the friends that I made here in the Dallas area were through my husband. And so there's so many people invested in your marriage that you don't even know.
Yeah, you're taking his background and his friends and your background and your friends, you're putting them in a blender. And what you're doing is you're coming
That's
up with
right.
a new group
Yeah.
of people. And we sometimes forget about that. And you mentioned, all right, then there's children that come into the picture. And I think, in my opinion, I think you'll probably think the same way, is that far too often it's the kids that are used as a scapegoat for the marriage falling apart. The kids are wild. They can't control them. They don't allow us as parents to be who we were when we were dating. They're kind of in the way. And so it's a reason for probably more so the man to say, I don't like this situation anymore. I'm out of here. And then we're left with single moms raising kids on their own and being put into that position. And you don't often hear about the woman who says, I've had enough, and she leaves. And now it's dad who ends up becoming the single mom.
Yeah, and that happens, but just like you said, it's very rare. And I like the idea of the husband and the wife teaming up, becoming the true partners that they were meant to be, and handling those children, whatever that looks like in that particular household. But the two of them, developing a united front, a strong alliance. So, just as you mentioned, like wrestling with these teens can cause a rift in the marriage. I think that um, if you change your mindset and partner together to address the problem, that would be a more successful, a more beneficial outcome for everyone involved. And believe me, I understand that's easier said than done in a lot of instances, but that's what the Abigail Movement is about. Providing resources and encouragement and support so those decisions can be made between the husband and wife, and they can be supported through that season. Because a lot of times these are just seasons. This is just a storm. And once you get to the other side, you'll just be like, phew, I'm glad that's over. You have a story, a
Absolutely.
testimony to
Yeah.
share, to encourage someone else.
I think if there's anybody that ever says, no, I have never had a road bump in my marriage, been married many, many years, we have never had a road bump. Boy, you either are doing something very wrong, or you haven't been around the next corner, because there is a bump that's coming up and you got to be prepared for it. So you mentioned the Abigail Movement, and we also know about the book. And all, which came first, the Abigail Movement or the book? The idea for the book?
The book came first. The
All
book
right.
came as a result of, well, I guess I should start here. I've filed for divorce twice. And in
And
both
that was a
times,
fascinating piece of why I wanted this story to be
oh,
told. Is it because you didn't just write a book about how to just stay in a marriage? It's because it's based on fact that you almost walked away twice.
yeah, yes. And just like you mentioned, women file for divorce at twice the rate of men. And I saw myself with that group and completely understanding that group and wanting to encourage and support that group and like help change the mindset, their thought process about their marriage. So yeah, that's what happened first. I
Mirenda, you say that the women file for divorce twice as many times as men. Is it because they feel that they are either physically or emotionally abused, and all? They are neglected and they want to move on with their life and find a better life? Is that one of the key elements why the women are motivated to file for divorce? Or is it infidelity or so on the man's part? He's just gotten stale with his wife and family, and he wants to move on for some more excitement.
you know, That question is as unique as each individual woman. It just depends on the lady that you're talking to that day, as to
Uh-huh.
the answer that you will get. But in every instance, I think that whatever the cause, she's had enough. She's had enough. And that's why you find that there are women who've been married 15, 20, 25 years. And then, they file for a divorce, or they separate from their husbands. It's not that this thing happened all of a sudden.
Right.
It probably happened 20 years prior. And, and she left in her heart long before she left physically.
Well, and also, is it fair to say that even though there may be a little disharmony within the marriage, that often parents will say, "Well, we'll just ride it out until the kids are grown and out of the house. Once they hit 18 and they move on to college or whatever, they're gone. So are we."
Yes. And you know what? Our kids are still our kiddos. You told me a story about your son and your grandson before we started recording, right? That never changes. So it doesn't. And when they go to college, don't they need us even more? Don't they need us to support them and encourage them
Right.
through navigating? We were just talking about middle school. College is times 100, right? So they need us even more than to be a strong team and a strong support system for college kiddos. So they're always our kiddos. And then from there, what happens? They get married. And so now we got to encourage them in their marriage. And then they have kids. And now we have to model for them and be grandma and grandpa for the grandkids. So it never ends.
Well, and if you stop and look at the statistics, and a lot of young people that grow up and get married and have trouble with their marriages, it's probably because they came from a broken marriage home. So it was a little more acceptable or understandable to them. Well, my parents divorced when I was 12. So, it's not unusual that you and I are having a problem and we're going to split up.
Well,
But you said earlier, and you and Carlos have what, three children?
we do.
And what are their ages now?
Oh, we're in an even year. It's an even year for us. So they're 14, 16, and 18.
Okay. So they're 14, 16, and 18 today. You said you almost filed for divorce twice. What time period was that? How many years ago was that?
They were littles. I guess the first time they were probably, I think in both times were during their elementary years. And my youngest is intellectually disabled. And in the special needs community, those statistics are even higher because of the stress of having a special kiddo.
Right.
And yes, and so I'm a part of that community too, and I
That's
definitely
when
want to
that
support
special
those
needs
women.
kiddo really needs to have mommy and daddy there to assist and help him grow. And all, and when there's disharmony in the house and there's thought of splitting it up again, is dad going to say, yeah, I'll be happy to carry on my life and take care of my special needs kiddo? No, it's probably going to go with mom.
Right.
And so that puts the
Yes.
burden on your shoulders.
Yeah. It's a heavy weight, but I was the one who wanted to leave, not my husband. And he was also the one who reminded me of the pain of my parents divorcing and what it looked like for us economically, even, to go from living in a house to living in an apartment. And for him, when his parents divorced, he went from living in Missouri in his house, in his own room, to moving to Louisiana and living with his grandmother and sharing a room with one of his female cousins whose parents had just went through a divorce too. So just the emotional and financial, social, I mean, the impact is huge
Right.
on
Right.
a child, and the fallout, the blast area is wide for family and friends as well. But when he said that to me, I remembered, and I did not want my kiddos to suffer that, to go through that, because especially my special girl, they all love my husband, but my special girl, I could see her torturing me every day, asking me about her father, wanting her father. I mean, and of course, it's not that it's not for me. Initially it wasn't for me, it was for them. I stayed for them. And
Right.
I thought, because he's a great dad, and I just felt like he was really falling short in the husband category. I was telling him what I needed. We were going to church and the pastor was telling him, like, this is what um, the Bible says about loving your wife, and this is what the Bible says about respecting your husband. And I was like, and for me, I'm just like, I'm a rule follower. I guess that's why I was such a good soldier. I was like, okay, if that's what we got to do, let's do it. And he was like, I mean, it didn't have the same effect on him, which really rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, listen, this is what the word of God says, and
Well,
I need you to obey.
we all stood in front of of our religious leaders when we on the day we got married, and maybe it's a matter of just forgetting that the vows that you took said for richer, for poorer, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. You're looking in each other's eyes so filled with admiration and love, and you say, I do. And then a couple of years later, you forget that you stood there and said that, which brings me to a point that I want to discuss with you is, do you think that maybe we need to teach our young people a little bit more about premarital preparation in our churches, in our schools, in our lives, so that they are better equipped to accept marriage for what it really is and should be, rather than just, oh, I am so in love with him and her, and we're just going to go off and get married and be happily ever after.
Yes.
I think there needs to be a course, whether it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, to sit down and say, as my wife and I have said, and by the way, we've been married 47 years,
Ah,
and and we can still look in each other's eyes and not say a word and know how each other is feeling, and know how to
beautiful.
adjust our day based on the feeling of each other. And we knew right from the beginning of our marriage that it was something we were going to have to work on every year. And it doesn't get easier, folks. It actually gets harder, because with the children, with careers, with financial issues that sometimes come and go. We just went through COVID, and everybody was at home. You have to work twice as hard on that relationship and that marriage than you did 5 and 10 and 15 years ago. And it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get complacent unless you let it get complacent. And
Yes, and that's where the Abigail movement comes in, because I agree with you that um, that premarital counseling is important, and it is. Unfortunately, it's just not enough. It's not enough, and so the Abigail movement, um, we support women through education and mentorship, so they make informed decisions that lead to lasting marriages. So that education part is ongoing. It's not just the one-time premarital counseling. It's ongoing, and it can't be just that educational piece. It has to be mentorship. Someone has to walk alongside you and support you and encourage you when you want to give up.
Yeah, so the Abigail movement, when did this start? How long ago did you start the Abigail movement?
Okay, after I wrote the book, and this was like, I was depressed. I'm just going to put it out there, Stuart. I was depressed, mainly because my husband appealed to our childhood and what divorce did to us as children. He
Mhm.
didn't appeal to our love, our relationship, our oneness, our commitment, our vows. He didn't do that. And I took that personally, and I was wounded by that. But what I wish I would have thought was, he values our marriage. He values it for our children. He wants to model for them, not to make a promise and be willing to break that promise. So there was all these positive ways I could have viewed him talking me out of marriage both times, divorce both times. But I chose to look at it from a selfish perspective. He didn't say he wanted to be married to me. It wasn't about my love. It wasn't about me. And that brings me to this. You cannot be selfish in marriage. Marriage cannot be all about your feelings. And the whole thing can't revolve around you. And it's and a wedding does that, doesn't it? The wedding makes the wife believe that all things revolve around her, because that's how the marriage started, at the wedding. And so that's the mindset shift that I try to encourage wives to change. And a lot of times it's difficult because we spend so much time and so much money. We invest and pour into that wedding, and we don't do the same for the marriage. And so it's just a struggle for these women, and that's why you need mentors, and you need a group of women to support you and encourage you while you change your perspective and your mindset on marriage and what it should look like.
So you're thinking about divorce. Your kids are in elementary school and all. Is that the time that you now sat back and reassessed and said, you know what, I've got to come up with reasons to keep this marriage alive? And is that when you started the process of writing the book?
Well, I started writing the book during my depression. I stayed in bed. And this was prior to the pandemic. This was like in 2018, 2019. And it's so funny. During the pandemic, I woke up. God got me out of the bed. I was just writing like Dear God letters. I was journaling about my feelings. I was telling my father what was going on in my life. And then I stopped and I read what I had wrote. And I heard from the Holy Spirit, like, this is a book. This is just reading it encouraged me, and it helped me get out of bed. And so that's what I did. I got out of bed and I made it a book. And as I met with women and talked with women in these small groups, I learned that it's a mindset change that's going to take more than one book. And that's how we came up with the Abigail movement. And of course, it's named for Abigail in the Bible, because this woman knew how to stay and thrive, not just survive, but really, really thrive in a difficult marriage. So of course, I named the nonprofit organization for her.
Now, I want to tell everybody that's watching and listening to the program right now, the website is 7waystoStayMarried.com. And that's not SEVEN, it's the number 7waystoStayMarried.com. Visit the website because it'll give you a lot more information about Mirenda. It'll give you a lot of information about the book. You can order the book. It's a great read. It's a great reason for you to have that copy, not necessarily to shove in your husband's face and say, here, I want you to read this.
Don't do that.
No, but ladies, read it and then live it. That's really what it's all about. And then the Abigail Movement is more or less like that support mechanism in order to carry that thought forward.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit more about the Abigail Movement.
Please.
Presently, we have an advisory board. And this is, and again, because of the pandemic, we meet like this on Zoom calls and things like that. And these people are in the nonprofit community and they live in various states around the country. But now that we're coming out of the pandemic of sorts, we're coming out, and the Abigail Movement needs board members right here in this city.
And we're in the DFW area. And can they go to the website and then contact you through the website?
Yes, I believe that there is a place there where they can order the book and also contact me and let me know about their interest.
Now, are you looking both for board members who have been happily married forever, as well as maybe those that have been through an unsuccessful marriage? You want people on the board that come from both strata?
Absolutely. As the requirements are really simple, that you have a passion for traditional marriage and a heart for service.
Excellent. Excellent. And I want to back up in your life several years, because you mentioned so very briefly that you're a veteran. And number one, I thank you for your service.
My pleasure.
And you were in the Army for how many years?
10
years.
10 glorious years.
Yeah, and you don't spend 10 years in the Army and not learn something about being organized and being able to put your thought processes in a particular order. And I would venture to say that your thought process with thinking about divorce and then saying, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way, and I want to come up with ways to save my marriage, that part of that was reflected by your military service. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I also leaned on my military service when I considered duty and loyalty. So yes, those virtues and values also came into play for sure.
Did you have when did you meet your husband, Carlos?
I met Carlos after he did 3 years of active duty service in Germany. I met him on his 21st birthday. He asked me to dance, Stuart, and I said no. But he didn't give up. He came back and he asked me again, and I gave him a second look and I said yes. And I haven't always said yes to him, but I've said yes to him more than I've said no. And for that, I'm grateful.
And so you still been saying yes to each other for how many years?
26.
26. Wow.
26 years. Yes.
That's beautiful. And so, I'm sure that there are people that are saying, okay, wait a minute. She wrote this book about 7 reasons to stay married to the husband that you have. Tell us what some of the 7 reasons are.
Sure. Of course. we talked a little bit about one reason. I grouped together family and friends as a reason to stay married, because they do become invested in our relationship. I know when my grandmother was alive and I would call her, she would ask me about him. Within the first like 2 minutes of the conversation, she would ask me about him. And I would say he was fine. And if he was near me, I would say, you know, Grandma just asked about you. Well, actually, we call her Big Mama when she was alive. We called her Big Mama. It's like, Big Mama just asked about you. And then he'd come and he'd say, well, tell her XYZ.
Yeah.
He says XYZ. And then she would tell me to tell, and then I'd tell him. And so the whole conversation is happening between the two of them through me. And then she'd be like, older people, they end the conversation. It's like, well, I gotta go. Thanks for calling. And I'm like, well, we haven't talked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, she loved him. And even in heaven, she would have been devastated if I would have divorced him. So yes. So it matters to our friends and our family because they are invested in our marriages. And I don't think they even know to the extent of their investment until it's ripped apart.
So friends and family are one of the reasons to stay married. And what are some of the others that you have to soul search in order to make them happen?
Sure, there are obvious reasons. Our children, when you look at the statistics, homelessness, drug abuse, incarcerations, what do those kiddos have in common?
Broken homes.
Yes, they do. And I think that's preventable. And I truly believe this, Stuart, that strong marriages are the answer to many of our societal woes. If we could get the husband and the wife to work as a team, because I saw both of my grandparents, the maternal and the paternal. Because my parents divorced, I spent some time living with my maternal grandparents. So I saw them argue, I saw them bicker, and I also saw them make up. And I also saw them continue to work together. I saw them, I saw my grandfather grow vegetables in the garden and sell them in a local grocery store. And I saw my grandmother working in that grocery store, and I worked in that grocery store. So I saw them create something amazing. And they modeled that for me. And I was able to kind of lean back on what I saw and what I heard. And that's what kiddos do. They remember what they saw you do. And so they modeled that for me. So when my mother and my father divorced, and so
how old were you?
That was my option.
How old were you when they divorced?
Well, they separated long before that. I think I was maybe 7 when they divorced. I mean, when they separated, and who knows when they officially divorced, because they don't tell they don't tell their kiddos that. But we moved to a whole nother state. So yeah, so there was definitely a physical separation.
And that leaves a mark on you.
Absolutely. And it also, it told me that if I wasn't happy, that I could do that I could divorce. So it was a blessing that my husband had the forethought to say, remember when, and remember how that happened to you. And I had my grandparents' relationship to say, yeah, I did. I saw them have some terrible fights, but they never left each other. They never separated from each other. It was to death do us part. And now I love them and I respect them so much for that. And so that's what we're modeling for our kiddos. Don't make a promise that you can't keep. And your marriage promise is really unto God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You have to say that, right? Because
Yeah.
God, that could be anybody. But yes, the
Well,
God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you have
and that's
your marriages unto
yeah,
him.
that was one of the reasons why I said earlier is that we have to be able to form, whether it's in a book form or it's in a one-on-one situation, either with a trained marriage a counselor or a priest, a minister, a rabbi, some kind of a vehicle to get people to understand what this marriage road is all about and how to navigate it. Because, you know, if you don't understand what it is, because it's all pomp and circumstance at the beginning, and you want it to stay that way, and you know it won't. I'm not an authority, but I will tell you that the rest of your married life will never be like your wedding day or the honeymoon or the first year. Somebody once said, and it's interesting. I always remember this. Somebody said that when you get married, when you first get married, every time you have an intimate relationship, and I'll put $1 in the jar. And every time you go to bed and you have an intimate relationship with your spouse, put $1 in the jar. And they said that after 1 or 2 years, you will probably spend the rest of your marriage, after say 2 years, every time you have that intimate relationship, you take $1 out of the jar. And that you will probably spend the rest of your marriage taking the dollars out of the jar that you put in the first 2 years.
Wow.
So that vision is that you put so much love and affection into the beginning of the marriage, and then it starts to slow and it starts to slow, and you have a couple of children and it's even getting slower. And all of a sudden that closeness and affection almost seems to stop. And I said earlier, it doesn't mean the fire is out. It's just that the embers are kind of just glowing, and you got to find the spark to get those going.
That's right. Fan that flame.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be just on your anniversary. You say, oh, well, let's go out to a nice steakhouse and all, and have a nice dinner, have somebody watch the kids and all, and have an evening out. You got to make every day your anniversary, and celebrate it and enjoy it and share it.
There's no wonder you've been married for over 40 years.
Well, it ain't my first rodeo, like they say, you work at it. My wife and I, every night before we go to bed, she's either has her hand on my arm or I put my hand on her leg, or so we are touching. And it's been something that we have done our entire married lives. And like I said, it's an extension of us. We say we love each other very often, but sometimes we don't have to say it. It's just that simple touch. It's that simple gaze. It's that simple understanding. It's that knowing that when she is not feeling 100%, I sense it. And if you don't, then you got to work on that.
Absolutely.
So that you sense each other's emotions. So,
absolutely.
So we got kids, we got family
oneness.
And friends, we got a couple of reasons. What are some of the other reasons to work on this marriage and stick it out?
Well, God, for sure. That is, if you're a believer, if you're
and if you're not a believer, become one.
There you go. Okay.
Never too late.
Never too late. And of course, for love.
Yeah.
For love is another reason. And the final reason is, like you mentioned, to put some money in that jar for sexual intimacy. It's important. It's the beginnings of oneness, right? That's on your wedding night. That's where it all begins.
Right.
So the goal of marriage is two people becoming one. And initially, you do that through the act of physical intimacy. And then over time, we get to the level that you and your wife are at, where you can look at each other and have an idea of how you're feeling. You know, your love language is physical touch.
Yeah. One and one does equal one in a marriage.
Absolutely.
You know, it's coming together and it's deciding. And we often talk about the fact, you know, as simple as, what do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? Well, we'll go back and forth and back and forth. You want burgers? Do you want pasta? Do you want a salad? And sometimes you almost end up with a couple of bowls of cereal because you can't decide on what you want for dinner. But you know what? That's conversation. That's interaction. That's sharing a thought process. And if it ends up in a couple of bowls of cereal, so what?
So what?
You worked it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree completely.
So you wrote the book, you said, and then you spun off the Abigail Movement. And the Abigail
Yes.
Movement is how old? That's just a newbie, isn't it?
It's completely new. I started it. The 501c3 process is a long, lengthy process, especially during the pandemic when no one was in those government offices. So I started it during 2020, last year, and it became official this year, 2021. So yes, we are a very new fledgling organization, and we love to have folks who are military veterans, as well as those who are veterans in the nonprofit community, to join us if you're passionate about our mission.
Again, go to the website, 7waystostaymarried.com, and drop a note to Abigail, to Mirenda, and just say, you know, I think I might be interested in the Abigail Movement. Tell me a little bit more about it. And are you looking mainly, because this is the main thrust of this is to empower women in this? Do you want most of your board, all your board members to be women, or is this an open field?
Yes, absolutely not. We do not want our
Okay.
board members to be women. No, we definitely don't.
You
And
put
we
10
would
men,
love
you put 10 women in a room, you're going to get 20 opinions.
I won't take offense to that, Stuart. But of course, marriage is between husbands and wives. So we definitely need the male perspective. We respect men in their leadership positions as heads of our households. So most definitely we want men to join us, because if the other half of a marriage is the husband, we definitely need men as board members.
Yeah, so you obviously want to bridge both perspectives and all to come up with the right solutions. There's a quote that I think I read in some of the information about you that said, a man without is it
A
a man
wife?
without a wife is like a vase without flowers.
Yes.
And that's such a beautiful quotation. And guys and gals, think about that. If your vase is empty, or your flowers are dying, you need some fresh water, and you need some fresh love, and you need to build that relationship with your spouse.
Yes. Put those two together and have something beautiful to look at. The
Yep.
world can look at it and see beauty in it and be encouraged by it and want to have that for themselves.
Yeah, and if Miranda can do it for 26 years, and Lauren and I can do it for 47, and all, you can do it. You just have to work at it, and you have to sit down and discuss it. Turn the TV off, and I'll sit down at the table and talk to each other, and I'll put down the iPhones and stop the text messaging and interact with each other. That's part of working on that marriage.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know, you got it on your shirt right there, and that's what it's all about. It's working on it. Mirenda, you are a sweetheart. I can't thank you. I can't thank you
Thank
enough for spending
you.
some time sharing what your 7 ways to stay married are, and also your brand new baby, the Abigail Movement. If you're interested, reach out to Mirenda and say, I'd like to learn more about it, and maybe I would like to seriously consider being a member of your board, because it's a good idea, and it's a good program.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stuart. I appreciate that.
And again, thank you for your service to our country. And we are both
My
members of
pleasure.
the DFW Veterans Chamber of Commerce, and also I will see you on Friday morning at our meeting. And again, I can't thank you enough for spending a little bit of time with us today.
Yes, it was certainly my pleasure. Like you mentioned, we've been kind of hanging out on the Zoom calls every Friday morning, but to have this time together has certainly been special. I appreciate getting to know you a little more, and thanks again for having me.
And we will stay in touch, and thank you again for taking the time. Well, folks, that will do it for another edition of Someone You Should Know with Mirenda Canady. It was a great conversation. I hope you'll come back again next week. As I always say, be yourself, because everyone else is taken, and go out and make it a great week and a great weekend and all. And make sure you come back again next week for another edition of Someone You Should Know.